impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be true.
And it is not a question of a little occultism or a touch of mysticism, Mr. Denton. It is vampires with a host of damned souls of telepaths.
Thy father's spirit, doomed for a certain term to walk the night.
Here, the old gods aren't dead.
And what of the true god?
He's dead. Can't complain.
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
You're listening to Paranormal UK Radio.
Hi everybody, this is Irene Allen, the host of the Paranormal UK Radio Show, the flagship show of the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And I am here with the man himself tonight, Mark Johnson. I was going to say Markle Farkle.
Yeah, you haven't had a chance to say that in a while.
Markle Farkle, Markle Farkle, Markle Farkle.
You know, only my aunts called me that.
And me.
And I made the mistake of telling you that once, and now you won't let it go.
I love it. I love it. It's a great name. It's the sort of thing an auntie would call a little boy, isn't it? And I'm older than you, so I'm calling you it as well because you're a little boy.
When I was in third grade, you know, they had these young people's books that you could read because I became an avid reader, and one of them was called Mark Park Walk in the Dark.
Oh.
Of course, it had my name on it, so I had to read it several times.
Oh, yeah, of course you did. I don't know.
So,
okay, what's next?
Well, this is our first real official show of 2023. We had our introductory show last week, and now we'll be back on a bi-weekly schedule.
Mm-hmm. And again, we say thank you very much for Andy Mercer and Kerry Greenaway for stepping in and running the flagship show while we had our break.
Yes. Guys did an awesome job. Thank you very much.
And we love you.
And thank you to all of our listeners, the great feedback we got when we came back with last week's show. That's always...
I didn't think anyone missed us.
Yeah, I know. People be going, they got a show? Huh? Yeah, I mean, we are the flagship show. I mean, we existed before the network.
Yeah. Network grew up around the flagship.
Yep.
Didn't it?
Yeah, it did. Now here we all are, one big happy family.
Yeah. Okay, so that's boring. What are you going to tell them? What are you going to say next? Come on. What's been happening? What have you done? Is it snowing over there?
No, it's unusually warm here in the Northeast. It's like in the 50s today and maybe a little rain tomorrow. There's no snow anywhere in the forecast.
It's cold here, I tell you. It's really cold. We got the beast from the east.
Well, I've been wanting to go skiing, so I've been kind of hoping for some snow.
Have you got off the... are you actually on the piss?
On the what?
Piste.
What are you talking about?
On the piste.
Huh?
Do you ski up the mountain, down the mountainside, or are you on the little baby slopes?
Ah, so, okay, you know, it helps when you speak English.
I did.
No. Piste. You're speaking the kings.
Don't you know what the piste is?
No, I've never heard that expression in my life. But I'm an American.
It's to do with skiing.
So we talk right.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, you talk
I'm
right.
a decent skier.
Okay, I'll give you that. No, I won't. You don't talk right. Of course you don't. You know? You really don't. New Zealand talks right. Australia talks right. You don't talk right.
Australians don't talk right.
They do. They talk the Queen's
G'day.
English. Queen's, well, it's still with the Queen's English.
She.
G'day, g'day, g'day.
Uh-huh.
So.
Oh, well. Having said all that, why don't we go ahead and get on with our show?
Oh, all right then. Sorry about that. Did you pick that noise up then? That was my husband doing something from London.
Oh, no. Didn't hear anything.
Good.
Okay. Well, we're excited to have tonight's guest on. He actually has just recently joined the Paranormal UK Radio Network with his own show. Dr. Scott Taylor is the president of the Expanded Awareness Institute. Now, the EAI helps people interested in near-death and shared-death experiences explore what that experience means to them and to our culture as a whole. Scott's gift is the ability to make the exploration of the non-physical universe accessible to the curious. He's an author and voice of 6 best-selling CDs of guided meditations on near-death experiences in his Into the Light series. He's also a spiritual teacher, speaker, and researcher on near-death experiences, and is the host of the Afterlife Files here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. So we want to welcome Dr. Scott Taylor to the program. How are you tonight?
I'm awesome. Thank you, Mark. And really nice to be on your show, Irene. Hi there.
Lovely, lovely. Scott, you've done more than I've done. You've got a bigger bio than me. I'm jealous.
Well, I'll just slow down then. Don't worry. You can catch up.
All right, then. Okay.
Actually, Irene, he has a bigger public bio.
Yeah. La, 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 la.
Well, we can't talk about that anyway. So, Scott, let's first of all, the subject of near-death experiences is always very fascinating. We've discussed the subject in the past a few times. And it was actually funny. Recently, I spoke with a friend who was telling me about their own near-death experience. Very similar to what you hear about. There were slight differences with her experience. And so could you tell us what brought you... tell us a little bit about your background and what got you involved in studying near-death experiences.
Well, sure. Back in 1981, I had a shared death experience, and the term shared death experience didn't even exist then. And it wasn't until many years later that I found out that what I'd had was a form of near-death experience, which we now call shared. Would you like to hear the story?
Sure.
So I was in love with a woman. Her name was Mary Frances, and she and her son, Nolan, had been out sailing for the day in southern Minnesota. And on their way home from this afternoon of sailing, they were involved in a horrific car accident. And Mary Fran was killed outright. And Nolan, who had just turned 7, had a mortal head wound. If there's any advantage to living in southern Minnesota, it's that we weren't that far from the Mayo Clinic. So they were both rushed right there and received, world-class health care. But it didn't make a difference in Nolan's case, and it took him 6 days to make his transition. That becomes important because during that 6-day interval, as Nolan was fighting for his life, there was plenty of time for all of the family to show up, and Mary Fran was one of 9, and so by the time everyone accumulated, there was the brothers and sisters and the significant others and husbands and wives and aunts and uncles and grandparents, and that's just her side of the family. And then there's my side of the family too. And so there was a whole bunch of us that were holding vigil for Nolan. And because there were so many of us, I'm guessing 40, 50 of us, something like that.
Yeah.
We decided that what would make sense is that we divvy up the group, and every 3 hours, 2 of us would go in and keep Nolan company. Well, as it turned out, my shift was on early in the morning of the 6th day. It was from 3 a.m. till 5 a.m. in the morning. And so we meaning Mary Fran's sister Janny and I, went in and we had Nolan's favorite book, and we read to him. I should say that he never regained consciousness, and so that became interesting because the nurse on the floor was really quite specific in that people in comas, the last sense to go is the sense of hearing. Yeah. So it was really important that we communicate with Nolan. So we talked to him. We told him, we read his favorite stories, and then we told stories about his uncles and aunts. And as it turns out, that evening, Mary Fran's brothers had all gone throughout the Mayo Health System and swiped the cushions off the couches and used them to put on the floor of the waiting room so that people could actually have a place to lie down and be more comfortable. And, that's pretty fun. And, we just continued like that for a couple hours. And then it gets to be about 4:45 in the morning, and Janny, who is a trained emergency room nurse, went to the end of his bed and picked up the chart and took a look at all of the monitors that were, surrounding Nolan's head. And then she'd look at the chart, look at the monitors again, and she just held her hand out to me and said, "Scott, I think it's important that we say our goodbyes." Yeah. And so we sat down next to Nolan's head, and we told him that he had been a very brave boy and that he had fought so hard to stay alive and to stay with us. But if Mary Fran should come, remembering that she died at the accident scene 6 days before, that if Mary Fran had come, if she shows up, that it was okay that he leave and go with her, that would be the right thing to do if Mary Fran came and asked him to go with her. And we reiterated how much we cared for each other, and then our time was up, and we left, and another group came in. And I went into the waiting room and tried to find a cushion to lie down on for a little bit. Well, it wasn't 45 minutes later when the nurse on the floor came in and roused all of us and said, it's getting close and it's time. So there's a whole crowd of us filed into Nolan's room and gathered around the bed. And while just as luck would have it, I was actually one of the last people to enter into the room. And when I did, it was already 4 or 5 deep around the bed. And I thought, well, that's just silly. So I wound up sitting on the windowsill next to Mary Fran's brother, Willie, and we just waited. I mean, I don't know if you've held vigil with somebody who's made their transition, but at least in Nolan's case, it was very gentle, it was slow, and really the only thing there was to do was to, sit and watch the heart monitor. And eventually the heart monitor, goes silent and does that kind of ominous tone that happens when you flatline. So when Nolan flatlined, what I experienced was Mary Fran coming across the veil and scooping Nolan up out of his physical body. And the two of them had this exquisite reunion, as you could only imagine, between a mother and her son. And I was actually taken aback because I was somehow able to participate in that reunion. I could feel what they were feeling, and it was extraordinary. This bond between mother and son, and the fact that they were somehow willing to share it.
Yeah.
But what surprised me even more was that after that reunion, the two of them then turned to me, embraced me, and then the three of us left and went into the light.
The three of you?
The three of us.
Right. So this is interesting.
Now,
so this is a shared experience.
This is a shared death experience, correct.
So was this like imagery playing out in your mind? Was it something that you felt more than saw? I mean, what were the sensations that you were experiencing when this was going on?
That's a really good question, because I'm using visual words, imagery, but it really wasn't like that. The best I could explain it is that there were these energy beings that had, I just call them an energy signature. I knew it was Mary Fran and it was Nolan. There was no question in my mind, but did it look like them? Well, no, not really.
So really it was a knowing, but you could pick up on the actual energy in the room of it happening.
Yes, absolutely.
And through that, it became a knowing, so you knew what was going on, you know.
Yes, and then once we were in the light, we had time to communicate, and we had time to express our affection for each other. We had time to say a proper goodbye. That, of course, we didn't because, I wasn't at the scene of the accident. I was at work.
Yeah.
So, there was this. It was a chance to say goodbye, and then we got to be together, just kind of be there, the three of us in the light, and then at some point, it felt complete.
Yeah. Can you describe the light that you were in? Was it more that you were actually on another plane, or you felt like you were on another plane, or was it the fact that it's as if they joined into your body, into your mind, and it all took place there in your physical body?
Yeah. So what we know about people who have near-death experiences or shared death experiences, there's three kinds of light.
Yeah.
There's the white light that you always, you see a lot of that in the media, the white light at the end of the tunnel. Mm-hmm. There's also black light. And there's the third one is clear light. And clear light is relatively rare, and it's the kind that I had. And what it means is that it's like you enter into another dimension that's in the same location as the physical dimension. But what you begin to realize is that everything exudes its own energy. It exudes this clear light.
Yeah.
And you get and you merge with it, because you realize that that I am made up of this clear light, that the table, the floor, the chairs, the other people in the room, everything is made up of the loving light of the universe, and I merged into it. Excuse me. And it's an odd feature of the light in that I was one with the universe and everything in it. Mm-hmm. And at the very same time, I had a separateness that was me. So it's this dual nature that happens. It's, I am me, and I am also one with everything around me. So
I can understand this.
Yeah. So at the same time that I'm feeling connected to everything in the universe, I can have a very singular message between Mary Fran, Nolan, and me. We can have that exchange that belongs to us, and at the same time, it belongs to everyone.
Yeah, it's very beautiful. There's a question I want to ask you, but first of all, like you said earlier on, about talking to people in coma state. My mother was in a coma with when she had a tumour on the brain many, many years ago. That was the first thing the nurse said to me, so I sat there day and night talking to her. So, I understand that. And I've also been with many, many people that have died and watched them cross over and helped them in a way. And in more than one way.
Maybe they were trying to get away from all that yapping going on.
They were trying to get away from me, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but
you do have that effect on people.
I do, don't I? Read the book. Anyway, getting back to that, to my question, right? Many, many years ago, back in the 70s, my father got up in the morning and I was doing some ironing at the ironing board, getting ready to go for work. So I was ironing something because I worked in London at the time. And he said to me that he had a weird dream during the night. Well, he thinks it's a dream, he said, but it was so real. He said, I was traveling down a tunnel, he said, and as I was going down, he said it was quite dark, and he said, as I was going down, hands were reaching out for me. And I said, well, what do you think it means? Because I didn't want to say anything to him. So I said, what do you think it means? So he said, I've got no idea. But a week later, he was taken into hospital suddenly with bowel cancer. And the only thing he'd ever told me that he was suffering with was a backache. And a week or 2 weeks after that, he was dead.
Wow, that's quick.
So, was that a near-death experience? Was that a premonition? What was that he saw? Can you explain to me? Because since the 1970s, it's always played on my mind.
Well,
I think I have a rough idea, but I don't know.
Okay, let me take a crack at it.
Okay.
If that had happened to me, the first thing I do is to recognize that when we leave our physical bodies and enter into the non-physical universe, we move outside of time. So it's quite likely that he had a little preview. He jumped forward ahead in time and had this experience of going down a tunnel. Since he didn't express any emotion around those hands, it's I have found the tunnel to be this energetic structure that is designed to help us transition from the world of the physical into the world of the non-physical. It's a very helpful metaphor that we create to help us realize that we are actually making this transition, so that when we arrive at the end of the tunnel, it's like, oh yeah, I get it. We're going to be someplace. And I've had a number of people describe the tunnel filled with other entities who are all being really helpful. And so, it's like helping hands. That's the image that immediately came to me, that if he needed help along the way, there were energy from this energetic structure that was manifesting itself in such a way as to look helpful. Like, hey man, you need a hand up. We're ready for you. We're here. And if you don't, just keep flying down the middle of the tunnel. Yeah. So I think
what you were saying about him jumping forward in time, that could very, very possibly be, because father like daughter, Mark.
Yeah, it could also be, his higher self, his higher consciousness tapping into that experience already. And as Dr. Taylor mentioned, time, is an illusion pretty much. So the mind at that level of consciousness, when we're asleep, we're in that REM state, especially, or the alpha state, can tune into other dimensions. It can tune into frequencies, and even, some premonition dreams, is seeing, what could be happening in the future, but it's not exactly the future. It's all happening at once. And that's what he was, I think, tapping into.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that's always been in the back of my mind, because he died in 1978. 1978 he died. And it was then that it happened, in 1978. But my mother, when she had the operation for this tumour I was telling you about, she had a near-death experience, or a sort of near-death experience. She told us when she came round that she was in a lovely place that was all white and fluffy, like cotton wool, and she was laying in it, and she didn't want to get up out of it. It was absolutely beautiful, and it enclosed her around her, and it was pure white and soft and woolly and lovely.
Isn't that a lovely image?
Yeah.
And we find that so often, that when people have a shared death experience or a near-death experience, they wind up in a landscape that is designed to help them feel comfortable, like here, your home. And, for your mom, it's fluffy and white. For me, it would be, like a walk in a woods during the fall. That's, kind of my happy place. Yeah. So
I suppose fluffy and white would be her, actually. Yeah. And then she's passed now, but wherever she is, she'll be in some fluffy white duvet somewhere, I expect. No, my mother.
Yeah, and just from your description, it's like she wrapped it around her, like it was, like you said, like it's a duvet. You pull it around you, and you feel snug and warm and
she comforted. She said it was absolutely lovely.
Yeah,
really lovely. So that just, but I I thought there was something going on with her there. That was an 8-hour operation she went through. There was something going on there, but I never actually tied it to a near-death experience.
Well, there's so many different stories of near-death experiences, people who are having operations or people who've been in accidents, people in operations who see themselves from above, watching the operation, can even report back exactly what the doctors were saying or doing. And sometimes they try to say, oh, well, it's the brain going through the death throes. But yet when you're flatlined, there's no electrical activity in the brain, you cannot be recording anything, seeing or hearing anything. And yet people still do. And they have not only the experience of what they're seeing in the room, but when they transition over and whatever their experience is when they go over to that other dimension.
Yep. And that breakthrough research came from a doctor in the Netherlands, Dr. Pim van Lommel, who wound up writing a book called Life Beyond Consciousness, where he performed the experiment where they monitored people who were under cardiac arrest in a hospital, all hooked up. And as you say, when you flatline, your brain is incapable of making memory. Yet he was able to establish that quite clearly during the time when people were flatlined, they did have memory, and they could accurately describe conversations that were going on and the type of equipment that was being used and actions of people in the room, even though, they had the sheet over their head, over their eyes. And so if people are interested in that, Life Beyond Consciousness is the breakthrough book that really said, it's not any of these other things. It's not a lack of oxygen in the brain. It's not, hallucinations. It's not dreams. My favorite is, there's some people who even posited the idea that, oh yeah, this is just a remembering of the birth experience. Like, really?
Yeah.
Like go to the light? So no, it's none of those things. And those have all been nicely put to rest. And we now have somewhere in the neighborhood of 30,000 documented near-death cases. And, that provides a database that gives you an extraordinarily high degree of confidence that these things are real and they exist. So anyway, we are now in the model of not trying to prove that near-death experiences exist or shared death experiences exist. We're now in the model of what do we, how do we live with what we know? And, when we begin to describe what the afterlife is like, what are the kinds of abilities that we have as human beings, how do we think about how we organize our society and our own particular belief structure? That's where all this research has been going lately, and I find it fascinating.
It is fascinating. What I was going to also ask you was, obviously people come to you with their stories. And do you find that some of these people, their life has totally changed?
Totally changed. They come back, universally, they come back profoundly changed.
Okay.
Because they have witnessed the non-physical universe. That's not the right word. Let's say they have experience, they know the non-physical universe because they were, again, a part of it, and they began to see this is how the universe is organized.
Yeah.
And we don't have it quite right. And so, we do the best we can to explain it, but now we actually have good scientific proof that what the near-death and shared-death people are telling us, this is the way it is.
Yeah. Do you have people actually come to you and say that where it's changed their life, they've suddenly developed gifts?
Gifts, absolutely.
Or there's the dark side to it, where they feel that they are not alone, that they've brought something back with them, like an attachment, a walk-in, step-in.
Yeah, at the beginning, there was some concern that there were walk-ins, and that's the idea that one soul has left and a completely different soul has come into the physical body that has been reanimated here on Earth. But that has largely gone away. The concern at the beginning was that, people come back and they are so profoundly changed by what it is that they learned on the other side that they are like a different person. They aren't a different person. It's the same soul, but they have such a different view on how to be here in the physical world that everything around them is different because they have a different worldview, and distressingly so. It's one of the reasons that near-death experiencers have somewhere around an 80% divorce rate.
Well, I liken it to something like a blind person seeing for the first time.
Yeah. All of a sudden, this whole extra
new world opens
sensory perception is there. Yeah.
Well, I want to ask about the divorce rate for people who come back and they've had this profound change. What do you think is the reason for that?
Well, they married one person, and the person who came back is so changed that, you just might not like that person anymore. Or, I don't know, say you were a profoundly conservative Christian. Mm-hmm. And with that set of beliefs that's, really structured in there. And as a couple, that was your thing. Well, now you come back and the near-death experiencer saying, well, you know what we learned in church? That isn't exactly how I experienced it on the other side. And, you know, the rift just starts from there. And at some point they go, you know, we don't see the world the same way. And frankly, I like the old you better. and you know, and then they separate. So I've got a little bit more of that story if you want me to
Yes,
continue.
please. Carry on.
So where we left off was
you had this
on into the
shared
light,
experience, yeah.
and I'm there with Mary, Fran, and Nolan, and we had a chance to say our goodbyes. Well, one of the other things that happened to me while this was going on is that I was, you know, sitting on this windowsill, but I was also 100% in the room with the other grieving relatives. And I didn't have a word for it then, but I do now. It's called bilocation. I was in two locations at once with two totally separate consciousnesses that were fully operational. That makes sense. I was in two places at once, and I could be in two places at once. And I know this because I'm sitting there on this windowsill, and it's like the love of the universe is inside of me and trying to break out. And my face just showed it. I mean, it was filled with joy and love and rapture and connected to all things, you know. And if anybody, any of the other relatives had looked at me during that time, they would have seen somebody who was entirely inappropriate for the room. And I knew that.
Yeah.
And I couldn't change my expression because it was just so amazing. So I did the only thing I could think of, which was raise my hands and bury my face in my hands. And I stayed that way until that other part of me that was with Mary, Fran, and Nolan, you know, came back, and like the two parts of me recombined again. And then I was able to be together, and I could be present. I could take my hands down and, you know, hug the other people in the room and cry on each other's shoulders, you know, and just be with people who had, you know, lost Mary Fran 6 days before and Nolan just moments before. Yeah, it was a profoundly sad place to be, and it was appropriate that, you know, I be sad and grieving. So this is one of the things that is most difficult for me to explain about this whole thing is as I retell this story, it's as if I can enter into this amazing, loving, connected space and at the very same time be profoundly sad at having lost Mary, Fran, and Nolan. So it's those two emotions are woven together. They just can't be separated. So, you know, at the moment of my greatest joy, I'm in my greatest grief.
Yeah.
And it's complicated that way.
Well, I mean, I'll speak from my own recent experiences. You know, I lost my wife about a month and a half ago. Now, in her situation, she had a stroke and she went very quickly. But she was on life support because she was an organ donor. So she, even though the spirit was gone, the body was kept alive for a few days while they found organ donors. So we sat vigil with her, and we were there with her, even though in my heart I knew she had already moved on and transitioned. And I understand what you mean about that duality of those dual emotions, because I've always had a strong belief in the spiritual world or the afterlife or whatever you want to call it. And I knew that she had moved on, was there, was okay and happy, and yet at the same time filled with grief, losing my wife. And I still feel that way. You know, there are times when the grief overtakes me, and other times I know she's over there, and I'll talk out loud to her. And I'm curious with your thoughts when you're dealing with somebody. It's one thing when someone's in a coma and they say to talk to them because they can hear you. But if somebody is clinically brain dead, unless the spirit's hanging around, they're really not hearing you, I guess, because it's just the body being kept alive.
Well, that's really interesting, because when Mary Fran was taken to Mayo, the same thing. When she arrived, she was brain dead, and when I had a chance to go see her in the hospital room, they were keeping her body alive for exactly the same reason. In fact, she donated all kinds of organs and was the first donor for Mayo's first heart transplant. So I was in the room, you know, holding Mary Fran's hand and talking to her, but there was a real clear sense for me anyway that there's nobody home. That she had made her transition and she was gone, and you know, maybe she was looking out over me, but at that point, the grief was so profound I couldn't sense it. And it wasn't until 6 days later, when Nolan made his transition, that I was able to, you know, reconnect with the both of them, with Mary Fran and Nolan. But yeah, you know, you're right, Mark. I don't know. It's not there. You can really tell when the body is animated and there is a soul that resides there, and when there isn't. Mm-hmm. It's just a shell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you, sorry, Mark, so Scott, when you joined them both, and at that time Nolan went over and you felt what you felt, was that the beginning of the healing for you?
Oh, incredible healing. The fact that we had a chance to express our affection for each other, our love for each other, and that we had a chance to say goodbye, you know, brought some closure to it. But at the same time, I desperately wanted to see them again. And when I left there, I knew in every fiber of my being that if I did it once, I could do it again. I just had to figure out a way to do it. Mm-hmm. That I could, and I found that there's a whole long story about all the different methods I tried, but I found it through the use of binaural beat technology that Bob Monroe developed.
I use them.
Yep. It's just amazing for the ability to enter into expanded states of awareness, hold that state long enough that you can actually learn the tools to navigate in that realm. And that's how I reconnected with Mary, Fran, and Nolan. And I still have my connection with them to this day.
That's good.
It's just nice. It's just lovely.
Yeah, it is. It's lovely.
One question I want your opinion on is, you know, like what we were mentioning earlier with Irene's. Was it your mother that had the white clouds? That saw the white fluffy?
Yep.
That was Mum.
Okay. People who have NDEs a lot of times report when they've actually go through the tunnel, transition over, and they'll have their expectation, or they'll have things happen that make them comfortable, like you mentioned. Like for her, it was white fluffy clouds, probably what in her mind what heaven is like, because that's what we're told. People meet religious figures, or angels, like Archangel Michael or whatnot, and yet and then of course they're sent back, sometimes kicking and screaming because they don't want to come back.
That is true.
Once they're over there, it's like they're given the choice. Some people make the choice to come back, others say they don't give them a choice. They say, nope, you've got to go back. And in my mind, it always seems to be that we are shown these people, these figures. I don't want to call it deception. It's not exactly deception. I believe that people are shown what will make them more comfortable, that fits in with their belief system at that level and at that stage. So if you meet Jesus, or you meet an angel, or somebody famous or whatnot, whatever is coming to meet you is maybe projecting that persona to better communicate with you, put you at ease, comfort you, whatever, knowing you're going back. But if you were to continue onward, I think that veil would drop, and then you'd see who or what the entity really is, which, we really don't know, other than some type of higher level consciousness that we deal with. Whether you want to call that angels, whether call that ascended masters, I have no idea. But I always felt that, depending on your belief system, helps dictate a lot of what you experience when you have an NDE. What are your thoughts on that?
Interesting. So probably the premier researcher in this field is Dr. Bruce Grayson at the University of Virginia. Recently retired from there. And we were having this exact same discussion a couple of months ago. And it's his contention that we all, as we're making this transition, we all have the same experience. However, what is going on is that we have in our minds certain frameworks, so that when the energy comes in for a divine being, in our head, we have to interpret that. We have to make sense of that energy. And, I might say it's Jesus. You might say it's Buddha. Somebody else might say it's their bear totem. It's the same energy, but we're trying to make sense of it because of the metaphors that are in our head. If it's really unlikely that we would be shown something that, it just wouldn't make any sense to us if it came in another form. So we're trying to interpret what's going on with people. And I've had enough conversations with folks that I think you're right, that after a while you get acclimated and you go, would you show me your true form? And that divine being, say it's an angel will say, sure, and they'll drop the physical presence and show you what they look like as a pure ball of energy, for instance. And then you could even ask them to drop that, so to further get to what it is their true nature is. So we are restricted from, but by the metaphors that we have stored in our mind because of our culture, and that's why, people, when they are of the Hindu tradition, they pass through the bardos, and, American Christians might see Jesus or Mother Mary. I mean, it's all depends on what it is that we have inside of us that says this is a holy, sacred being that's in front of me. It might show up as Archangel Michael. It might show up as something else.
Plus the fact that a lot of what takes place on that level is literally beyond our physical 3D, comprehension. When we're down here, we can only interpret so much. It's like trying to explain quantum physics to an ant. So we'll come back with this imagery and hold on to it. And, our lives could be changed. Maybe we develop abilities or whatnot. Yet we still are remembering what we can bring back with us. And there's a lot of similarities to, I'm going to throw this out there, there's a lot of similarities to what happens with people who are UFO experiencers, who've gone through the abduction phenomenon. There's something called screen memories, that a lot of these people, they'll describe things one way until they've gone under hypnosis, and then it realized that, the facade drops and they see things how they really are playing out. And I always felt that a lot of what happens on a spiritual level with near-death experiences, maybe even with people who are astral traveling, experiencing some of these other realms, you bring back what your human brain can comprehend and make sense out of.
Yep, that's exactly the words. We're trying to make sense of something that is not from our experience. I think of it, as somebody who lives in a 2D universe, just, length and width, and all of a sudden, they have the experience of height, and would they even recognize it? And when they do, how would they explain it? And, that's when I give some real slack to people who are trying to, they go to the mountaintop and they have this revelation, and they're trying to describe something that is so outside of their experience. The only thing they can draw on is, what they've heard. Like, was the universe created in 6 days? Well, yeah. No, it's 13.8 billion years old, and it was created in an instant. How do you describe something that was created outside of time? And so now you're going, oh, okay. So I have a lot of empathy for people who are trying to describe something that they don't have much background for. And it's when, when you look at the list of common elements that come from near-death experiences, the very first one always is ineffable, which is a great English word for, we don't have the English word for it. It's so hard to describe. And, I'll interview people, and at some point they will do this, goldfish thing, where you can see their mouth move, and yet there's no sound coming out because they are trying desperately to come up with words to describe an experience that really doesn't have any words. So they get extra points for trying, though.
No, most people who have the near-death experience or the shared death experience, it's overwhelmingly positive. Yet every now and then you get someone who has a very negative experience. They they experience what we would think of as hell.
We interviewed one that had that once, didn't we?
Yeah, I think a long time ago we did. And, I was wondering in your research if you've ever come across someone like that.
Yeah, and it's actually extraordinarily difficult to get somebody who's, in the literature, it's called a less than positive experience, LITP, bad acronym, and because they're like double losers, have said, everybody else has this really pleasant experience and I didn't. And if I tell this experience, people aren't going to believe me, and I'm not going to be accepted. It's really difficult. And so I have spoken to people. One of them is Nancy Evans Bush. She has written 3 books on negative or less than positive near-death experiences. And she's talked to more than I have, but in the ones that I've talked to that have had a negative experience, overwhelmingly, it's the 2x4 long side of the head of counseling. It's essentially they've entered into this experience, and it's like their guides have whacked them alongside the head and said, "Will you pay attention?"
This is their wake-up call.
Your attention? We have been trying to tell you for decades that you are on the wrong path. You signed up to do this thing. You are nowhere close to doing what you wanted to do in this physical life. Shape up. And so it was like, whoa. And very often, they'll come back and they'll go, I've been just a twit, and I'm not doing what I need to do. Okay, so that's
they become a changed person as well.
Yeah, they get changed. There's another group where this is an experience where let's see. Joseph Campbell writes about this. This is the whole hero's journey for those of you who would do that. And in the hero's journey, there's a section of that hero's journey where the hero has to overcome adversity. And not often, but a fair amount of time, folks that have a less than positive experience, this is their time to overcome adversity. And they are presented with some sort of situation that they have to overcome through the use of creativity, through the use of energy, through the use of prayer, divine. It all depends on what their need is. But sometime in their life, they have to stand up and claim the powerful being that they are, and how they are tapped into the power and the strength and the intelligence of the universe. And it's time to claim that. And the situation that's presenting itself is designed specifically for that. Little corollary on that is that when we teach guided meditations, we take people into these spaces that near-death experiencers go to. And sometimes people will have what they would call a scary experience. And I really like to reframe that, because most often it's not scary. Most often it's startled. That, people will come, I think Harry Potter, I think it's the first film where he goes down in the basement, and there's a trap door that he has to go through, and there's a 3-headed dog in there that's all growling and drooling and everything, and they have to figure out a way around this 3-headed dog. Anyway, when they walk into that room, they're startled. And what we teach people is that if you can maintain your composure, that's the idea, maintain your composure, kind of step back a little bit and go, okay, now that you have my attention, what is it that you're trying to tell me? And universally, that 3-headed dog will switch into some other form. Maybe it's a monk with a brown robe or something with Birkenstocks. Pick your image, and this entity will say, what we have been trying to tell you is X, Y, and Z. And we had to use the 3-headed drooling dog because you weren't paying attention.
Yeah. I remember this interview now, parts of it. He was in a very, very dark place, and there was kind of like structures there, but darting in and out between the structures was black shapes, and he was being followed by something.
Mm-hmm.
Something really bad was following him.
Yep.
And he couldn't get away from it.
Yep. And, if that had happened to me, I've done this long enough that I would turn around, face the thing, and go, "Hi."
Yes. I know why.
Who are you, and why are you following me, and why are you, exuding this nasty energy?
Yeah.
And
that's the sort of thing that I do, but I'm not so polite as you.
Oh, that's funny.
No,
and the smallest group out of those that have a negative experience just have one.
Yeah.
And they're good people. They treat others with respect. There's nothing wrong with their life, but they have this experience, and I have this little bucket of, I don't know why that happened to you. There's the 2x4, there's the hero's journey, and then there's the, I don't know why that happens. And I need to, have enough leeway in my thought process to say that I can be open to suggestion as to, the universe and the mysterious ways that sometimes our guides bring experience to us.
Right. Can I ask you something else?
Of course.
Okay. Your definition of ghosts now, do you think these are souls that have not passed over?
Oh, they've passed over, but for some reason they are still attached to the vibration of the earth.
Mm.
And at least in my cosmology, when you make the full transition, when you leave your physical body and you enter into the light, you change your vibratory level to match the light. Some souls just don't make that vibratory transition. They have some reason for staying close to the physical earth. Think of a mother and her children that she really wanted to raise, so she sticks around.
Yeah.
Some people have real affinity for a particular place, and so they want to be in that place because there's some sort of emotional connection for them, either good or bad. But they like that old house that they used to live in, and so there's a whole group of folks that don't know they're dead.
Yeah.
Think soldiers on the battlefield. 1 second you're running across the field, and the next second, you don't have a body anymore because it was hit by a shell or you were blown up, but your soul keeps running. Yeah,
this is another thing that gets me. You can pick up on ghosts and spirits, do investigations on people that go back to Henry VIII, maybe earlier, but never get anything from the Stone Age or the dinosaurs or anything like that. So do you understand what I mean? It's sort of after the Elizabethan age or before the Elizabethan age, there doesn't seem to be anything about walking this earth.
Well, I just did an interview with a person who went back 400,000 years. So
did they see a ghost of anything?
No ghosts.
Yeah.
Maybe they were more in tune.
Well, see, I always
back then,
I always felt that they eventually move on. That's why there's nothing that old.
Yeah, but Mark, like Scott just said, maybe they are more in tune. They were more aware of the earth and everything in those days.
Mm-hmm.
The planet, the sun, the moon. Well, and what we are,
Yeah, what we know about soul retrieval is, so somebody leaves their physical body and maybe they're confused, maybe they're attached to the physical, but they haven't made it all the way to the light yet or raised their vibration up to that light.
Yeah.
And so they're just hanging out there. And the key to this whole thing is something Mark just said, is, at some point they'll have some sort of a self-awareness to go, is this all there is? Really? Is this it? With some sort of attitude that I'm sure, Irene, you could help supply. And when they get, kind of that really irritated, is this it? Really?
Yeah.
Then that's the breakthrough, because that energetic boost changed their vibratory level, and now all of a sudden they can see the guides that have always been there trying to help them. And poof, off they go. And the folks that do the soul retrieval do that kind of work, just naturally. They find folks and through conversation or through touch,
through feeling.
It's
an exchange of energy.
They exchange energy, raise their vibratory level, and it's this veil just disappears in front of their non-physical eyes, and they're able to move on. And they go, "Oh, really? Yeah, let me show you where your folks are. They're waiting for you." Really? Okay. And then off you go. So it's very valuable work, and I really admire the people who do that kind of soul retrieval.
I used to do it a long time ago, but I've retired, didn't I, Mark?
Yeah.
I'm about to write another book on it. But it's
valuable work, and at some point, everybody will figure it out.
Yeah.
And they'll get irritated with themselves and their situation, and that's all that it takes.
It's, it could be sometimes like the movie Ghost, where when he first dies, he sees the light, he almost goes towards it, but then he sees his wife or whatever. Something in the physical keeps him there, and he makes that decision to stay. But then after a while, the light comes back to get him, and they make the willing choice to go. So maybe something has to happen with them, or, they have something they've got to experience before they can do that full transition.
Yep. And I usually put the onus on the person, that the person in that movie, they've changed their vibratory level so they can see the light that has always been there. It has always been there for them, and they just haven't figured out how to see it yet.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We are never alone. There is no such thing as a lost soul, and we all can move on.
Very profound and so true. And we've come up on the end of the program here. Now, Scott, you have your program that airs bi-weekly here, the Afterlife Files, the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Now, where can people find some of your books and tapes and whatnot? Or how can they get in touch with you?
Yes. Thank you for asking. I appreciate that. The Afterlife Files can be found on wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to see it on video, it's on YouTube. We can do it on the UK network. That's awesome. But if you'd like to find out about me, my workshop, my albums, go to neardeathmeditations.com. neardeathmeditations.com. And there's a contact me thing. Send me an email through that site, and I actually answer everything that I get. So please feel free to use that, and that's where you can find me.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a fascinating conversation and very eye-opening. Very eye-opening.
Well, Mark,
No,
it's been
I
fun.
think we've all learnt something.
Irene, I'm going to take that as a win.
You're my lad.
Well, and I want to thank everybody else for tuning in to the Paranormal UK radio show, the flagship show here on the Paranormal UK radio network. And I wanted to say this last week, but baby, we're back. So
don't make me laugh. It hurts.
So we have lots more shows scheduled for the coming months, and we're really looking forward to it. So,
and we got a lot of other things going on in the pie.
Oh yeah, we've got a few things. Yeah, we got our fingers in a few pies here.
Yeah, we have, haven't we?
Yeah. That's just who we are. So. Everybody, you have a great week, and we will see you all next time. And Irene, I will talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.